The Springfield Three. 3 women, 1 empty house, and 34 years of questions. 3 women disappear from one house during the early morning hours. Their cars are still parked outside. Their purses, money, keys, and clothing are left behind. The family dog is inside the house. There are no clear signs of a struggle. There's no confirmed ransom demand, and no one can explain why 3 women, 2 young graduates and 1 mother, would suddenly leave without taking anything they needed. On the morning of June 7, 1992, friends entered a home on Delmar Street in Springfield, Missouri. They expected to find 19-year-old Suzie Streeter, her 18-year-old friend Stacy McCall, and Suzie's 47-year-old mother, Sherrill Levitt. Instead, they found an apparently empty house. The women's personal property was still there, but Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy were gone. More than 3 decades later, no confirmed trace of them has been found. No bodies, no verified crime scene, no proven explanation, and no criminal conviction. I'm Alan Key, a former major crimes detective and current polygraph examiner and author, and this is Cold Cases with Alan Key. Today we examine one of the United States' most baffling missing person investigations, the disappearance of the Springfield Three. We will look at who these women were, what happened on graduation night, the unusual condition of the house, the early investigative challenges, and the theories that have followed the case for more than 30 years. We will also separate verified evidence from rumor, or as I like to say, fact from fiction. Because behind the mystery are 3 real women whose families are still waiting for answers. The 3 women. Sherrill Elizabeth Levitt was 47 years old. She worked as a cosmetologist and lived in a single-story home at 1717 East Delmar Street in central Springfield. Sherrill was described as independent, hardworking, and devoted to her family. She had 2 children, Suzie and an older son named Bart. Suzanne Elizabeth Streeter, known as Suzie, was 19. She had just graduated from Kickapoo High School. Friends describe her as social and outgoing. She owned a blue Ford Escort, had plans for her future, and was celebrating the completion of an important chapter in her life. Stacy Kathleen McCall was 18 and one of Suzie's friends. She had also graduated from Kickapoo High School on June 6, 1992. Stacy was preparing to begin a new phase of her life. She had plans to attend college and was looking forward to the summer following graduation. These were 3 women at different stages of life. Sherrill was a mother with a home and established career. Suzie and Stacy were young women celebrating graduation and preparing for adulthood. There was no known reason for all 3 of them to voluntarily disappear together. They did not take their vehicles. They did not take their purses or other personal belongings. There was no evidence that they had packed for a trip, and there has been no verified communication from any of them since that morning. Graduation night, Saturday, June 6, 1992, was graduation day at Kickapoo High School. Suzie and Stacy attended the graduation ceremony and later joined friends at several celebrations. Their original plan was reportedly to spend the night at a hotel in Branson with friends. Branson is approximately 40 miles south of Springfield and is a popular entertainment destination. But those plans changed. The friends discovered that the accommodations were crowded, and Suzie and Stacy decided they would stay somewhere else. At one point, they reportedly considered spending the night at another friend's home. Eventually, Suzie and Stacy decided to go to Suzie's house on Delmar Street, where Sherrill lived. The 2 young women were last confirmed seen at approximately 2:15 in the morning as they left a friend's residence. Investigators believe they then drove to the Delmar Street home. The trip would not have taken long. Suzie's vehicle was later found parked at the residence, supporting the belief that she and Stacy arrived there. Sherrill had been home that evening. She reportedly spoke with a friend by telephone at approximately 11:15 p.m. and discussed ordinary matters, including refinishing or painting furniture. There was nothing in the conversation suggesting that she was frightened or expecting trouble. When Suzie and Stacy arrived, Sherrill may already have been asleep. The condition of the house later suggested that the women had prepared for bed. Beds appeared to have been used. Makeup had apparently been removed. The women's clothing and personal possessions remained in the house. What happened between their arrival and the following morning remains unknown. The FBI identifies the likely time of disappearance as approximately 2:15 to 7:30 a.m. That gives investigators a 5-hour period during which 3 women vanished without a confirmed witness seeing them leave. Later that morning, friends went to the Delmar Street home. When they arrived, Suzie and Sherrill's cars were outside. Stacy's vehicle had been left at another location because she had ridden with Suzie. The front door of the house was reportedly unlocked. One of the first unusual details involved the porch light. The glass globe covering the exterior light had been broken. Pieces of glass were on the porch. Friends reportedly swept up the broken glass before realizing that it might be evidence. In their defense, at the time, they did not know a crime had occurred. They believed the women might have gone somewhere and would return. The door was unlocked, and there was no obvious destruction inside the home. The family dog, a Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon, was inside and appeared agitated. The women's purses were present. Their money was still inside. Their keys, cigarettes, and other belongings had also been left behind. The women were nowhere to be found. One friend answered the telephone while inside the house. The caller made what was described as a strange or obscene statement and then hung up. A second similar call reportedly followed. The friends initially believed the calls might be a prank. It is unknown whether the calls were connected to the disappearance. Another important event involved the home's answering machine. Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, later arrived and noticed a message she considered disturbing or unusual. The message was accidentally erased before police could hear it. No recording survived, and nobody was ever able to recover it. No one could later provide investigators with a complete, exact account of what the caller said. This is one of the most frustrating aspects of the case. The message may have been completely unrelated. It may have been a prank. Or it may have contained information from someone connected to the disappearance. Because it was erased, investigators could never independently evaluate the caller's voice, wording, background sounds, or telephone origin. By early evening, concern had grown. Stacy's mother contacted police and reported the women missing. But by then, friends and relatives had been entering and leaving the house for hours. They had answered the telephone, cleaned the broken glass, and moved through rooms. None of them intended to damage an investigation. They did not yet understand that the home might be a crime scene. But once evidence is disturbed, it can rarely, if ever, be restored to its original condition. What was missing and what wasn't? The condition of the Delmar Street house is one reason this case continues to fascinate investigators. There was no obvious major struggle inside. No large amount of blood was publicly reported. Furniture had not been significantly overturned. Nothing clearly indicated that 3 women had fought for their lives. Yet almost everything suggested that they had not planned to leave. The cars remained outside. Purses were lined up inside the house. Money, identification, clothing, and personal items were still there. The dog was left behind. Sherrill's bed appeared to have been slept in. The young women's clothing and makeup suggested that they had settled in for the night. Why would all 3 women leave without shoes, purses, keys, or vehicles? One possibility is that they were forced out. An offender armed with a firearm could potentially control several victims without creating a large physical struggle. Another possibility is that one of the women recognized the person at the door. Someone familiar might have been allowed inside without immediate suspicion. A trusted person could have asked the women to step outside for what appeared to be a harmless reason. An offender might also have used deception, perhaps claiming there was an emergency involving a friend, relative, or vehicle. The broken porch light may also be important. It could indicate an altercation at the doorway. It could have been deliberately broken to create darkness. It could have been accidentally damaged by someone arriving or leaving, or it could have been unrelated. Without knowing when it broke, investigators cannot confidently place it within the crime. The absence of obvious violence does not mean the women left voluntarily. Control can be achieved through surprise, intimidation, or the threat of a weapon. But the lack of a clear crime scene deprived investigators of many traditional forms of evidence. There was no body from which to determine a cause of death. There was no confirmed location to process for blood patterns, weapons, or offender DNA. There was not even proof of where the women were when they first encountered danger. The Delmar house might have been the abduction scene, or the women may have willingly stepped outside before realizing they were at risk. The investigation begins. Springfield police began interviewing friends, relatives, neighbors, and people who attended the graduation parties. Investigators reconstructed the women's movements and examined their personal relationships. They checked hospitals, hotels, transportation centers, and locations around Springfield. The searches expanded into rural areas, lakes, and surrounding communities. The FBI, Missouri State Highway Patrol, and other agencies assisted Springfield police. Thousands of leads were eventually received. Posters showing the women's photographs and information were placed throughout the region. Their families made public appeals. A reward was even offered for information. Investigators examined whether Suzie or Stacy had encountered someone at a graduation celebration. They looked at Sherrill's relationships and employment. They considered former boyfriends, acquaintances, people with criminal histories, and strangers who might have observed the young women that night. But the initial delay and contamination of the house complicated the investigation. A major issue was determining exactly who had entered the residence before police secured it. Every legitimate visitor could leave fingerprints, hair, fibers, or DNA. If investigators found an unidentified print, they had to determine whether it belonged to the offender, a friend, a relative, a delivery person, or someone who had previously been inside for an innocent reason. The deleted telephone message presented another lost opportunity. Modern investigators might attempt to retrieve telephone records, identify incoming numbers, examine cell site information, and recover digital messages. But this was 1992. Home telephone records were limited, caller identification was not universal, and there were no smartphones tracking movements. Surveillance cameras were far less common. There were no routine license plate readers documenting vehicles on nearby streets. Once the first hours passed, much of the information that might now be preserved electronically was simply gone. Possible witness accounts. Several reported sightings have been discussed over the years. One witness claimed to have seen a van near the Delmar Street house. Another account involved a woman resembling Suzie driving a vehicle while apparently being controlled by a man. Investigators examined these reports, but none publicly produced the confirmed identification or recovery location. Eyewitness information must be evaluated carefully. A witness may sincerely believe a person or vehicle was connected to a crime and still be mistaken. Investigators ask when the memory was first reported. Did the witness see photographs or news coverage before giving the description? Was the lighting sufficient? How long did the observation last? Can the location and time be independently confirmed? A dramatic sighting is not automatically a reliable one. The case also produced numerous psychic claims, anonymous tips, and supposed confessions. Some directed investigators toward wells, farms, wooded areas, and construction sites. Searches were conducted in multiple locations. None resulted in the confirmed recovery of the three women. An especially persistent theory claims the women were buried beneath a parking structure or concrete foundation at a Springfield hospital. The claim grew from information associated with a private investigator or psychic source. Ground-penetrating radar was later reported to have detected anomalies in the area, but an anomaly is not proof of human remains. Buried pipes, construction debris, changes in soil density, and other objects can produce similar readings. Authorities have said they did not possess sufficient credible evidence to justify tearing up the location. That theory remains popular online, but it has not been established as fact. Persons discussed in the case. Over the years, several men have been discussed publicly in connection with the Springfield Three. It is important to emphasize that none has been convicted of abducting or killing Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy. One name frequently mentioned is Robert Craig Cox. Cox was a convicted criminal who lived in Springfield during the time of their disappearance. He reportedly made statements suggesting that he knew the women were dead and that their bodies would never be found. However, he did not provide verifiable details that allowed investigators to recover the women or prove his involvement. Cox has given inconsistent statements over the years. At times, he appeared to deny involvement while suggesting he possessed information. Such statements may attract attention, but investigators require corroboration. Did the person know any facts that were never released publicly? Can he be placed near the victims or the house? Is there physical evidence connecting him to the crime? Can his movements be independently verified? Without those connections, disturbing statements may be manipulation, boasting, or an attempt to gain publicity. Investigators also looked at individuals connected to Suzie's past relationships and social circle. Two men had reportedly been arrested in connection with an earlier grave robbing incident in which Suzie had provided information. This led to speculation that the disappearances were retaliation. Authorities investigated that possibility, but no charges resulted. Other theories have involved serial offenders, local criminals, and individuals attending the graduation parties. None has been proven. In a high-profile case, a person can become publicly associated with the investigation simply because police interviewed him. But being interviewed does not make someone guilty. Police routinely examine former partners, acquaintances, neighbors, and people with relevant criminal backgrounds. To be responsible, I will only identify an individual where the evidence was sufficient for prosecution or there appeared to be some substantial evidence suggesting the person may be involved. In this case, no one has reached the stage where there is sufficient evidence for prosecution. Could one person control three women? One of the central questions is whether a lone offender could have abducted three adults. The answer is yes, but under certain circumstances. A firearm immediately changes the balance of control. An offender can threaten one victim to force compliance from the others. The women may have believed that cooperating would prevent violence. They may have thought they were being taken only a short distance. The offender could also have arrived with an accomplice. More than one offender would make controlling and transporting three victims easier. But multiple offenders create additional risks. More people know the truth. More relationships can deteriorate. More opportunities exist for someone to confess, boast, or provide information. The offender may have targeted one of the women and taken the others because they were witnesses. Perhaps Suzie or Stacy was the intended victim and Sherrill happened to be present. Perhaps Sherrill was the target and the young women arrived at the worst possible moment. Or perhaps the offender did not know three people were inside until the encounter began. This uncertainty is why victimology is so important. Investigators must study each woman separately. Who had a conflict with Sherrill? Who was interested in Suzie? Who had contact with Stacy? Who knew the young women's graduation night plans? Who knew where Suzie lived? Who expected Sherrill to be alone? The offender's original intention may explain why the crime occurred when it did. A detective's perspective. From an investigative standpoint, several things stand out about the Springfield Three. The first is the narrow time frame. The young women were last seen at approximately 2:15 a.m. Friends began arriving at the Delmar house by about 7:30 a.m. that morning. That gives the offender a limited period to enter or approach the home, control three women, and remove them. The second issue is transportation. Suzie's car remained at the house. The offender therefore likely had access to another vehicle. That vehicle needed enough room to transport three victims, possibly under restraint. Investigators would examine vans, sport utility vehicles, pickup trucks, and large cars seen in the neighborhood. They would also consider whether the women were made to walk to a vehicle parked away from the house.
The third issue is the absence of the bodies. Moving and concealing 3 people requires time, privacy, and access to a suitable location. The offender may have been familiar with rural Greene County or the surrounding Ozarks. The person may have had access to private land, an abandoned structure, a well, a construction site, or another place unlikely to be searched. The recovery site may not have been close to the Delmar home. The fourth issue is the apparent lack of communication afterward. No credible ransom demand was received. The women's bank accounts and identities were not known to have been used in a way indicating they started new lives. No verified sighting has established that they survived beyond June 7th. That leads many investigators and observers to believe they were killed. But without their remains or other conclusive evidence, the exact outcome cannot be stated as proven fact. The fifth issue is the damaged crime scene. The people who entered the house did not intentionally destroy evidence. They did what friends often do when someone cannot be found. They checked the home and waited for them to return. But the broken glass was swept up. The telephone was answered. The message was erased. People walked through the rooms. By the time police understood the seriousness of the situation, the house no longer existed exactly as the women had left it. Cold cases are often shaped by ordinary actions taken before anyone realizes a crime has occurred.
What could solve the case today? The Springfield Three case could still be solved. The most likely breakthrough may come from information rather than laboratory science. There is no publicly identified piece of offender DNA known to be suitable for forensic genealogy. There are no recovered remains from which to establish a burial location or cause of death. But someone may still know something. A former spouse may remember a suspicious absence during the early morning of June 7th. A family member may recall a vehicle being cleaned or sold unexpectedly. Someone may have heard a confession or an incriminating statement. A property owner may remember unexplained digging, construction, or activity on isolated land. The offender may have died, but a person who helped conceal the crime could still be alive. Old records may also become useful when combined with modern computer analysis. Investigators today can compare addresses, employment histories, vehicle registrations, and relationships far more efficiently than detectives could in 1992. Digitized maps can help identify properties connected to known persons. Social network analysis may reveal links between individuals who appeared unrelated in the original reports. But technology cannot replace a witness who decides to tell the truth. After more than 3 decades, loyalty to an offender should no longer outweigh the right of 3 families to know what happened. Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall disappeared on a night that should have represented a beginning. Suzie and Stacy had graduated from high school. Their futures were opening in front of them. Sherrill was preparing to watch her daughter move into adulthood. Instead, the celebration became one of the United States' longest-running missing person mysteries. The empty house remains the central image of the case. Cars outside, purses inside, the dog waiting, beds that appeared to have been used, and 3 women gone without an explanation. Someone knows what happened. Perhaps one person committed the crime. Perhaps several people were involved. Perhaps someone helped with transportation or concealment without participating in the original abduction. Perhaps another person heard the truth years later and has remained silent. Information that once seemed insignificant may matter when compared with facts the police have never released. Anyone with genuine information should contact the Springfield Police Department or the FBI. Do not confront a suspected person. Do not spread unsupported accusations online. And do not assume that a popular theory is true simply because it has been repeated for years. Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy
deserve answers based on evidence. Their families deserve to know where they are. And after more than 3 decades, the truth is still worth pursuing. I'm Alan Key, and this has been Cold Cases with Alan Key. For more respectful, fact-based examinations of unsolved crimes, subscribe to this podcast and share this episode. You can also find my book, Cold Cases, the most infamous unsolved murders and the science that could solve them today, available through Amazon. Until next time, remember, behind every cold case are people who were loved. Behind every unanswered question is a family still waiting. And no matter how many years have passed, the truth still matters.